Okay, we are live now. We're live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. How are you? This is the John Riley Project, episode number 162. And I'm just so pleased to have as my guest today, Poway Councilperson, the incumbent, Caylin Frank. Caylin, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, John?
Good. Thanks for coming on. Gosh, I was going through my notes and you were on my episode number 12. And
Wow, I
now
know
we're up
it's
to
160 something. That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's been a while since you and I have had a chance to chat. So,
Yeah,
thanks for joining me.
absolutely.
I've got a whole bunch of questions I want to ask you about, your campaign and how the last 2 years have been going and some of the big problems you want to solve in Poway. But this is a live stream. And so, we'll be taking questions from the audience. So if you want to ask a question of Councilperson Frank, you can enter your comments in the comment section on either YouTube or Facebook. And, barring any outrageous or inappropriate questions, we'll be happy to share those. So, hey, but before we go, how you doing? How have the last 2 years or 2+ years been sitting on the city council? How's it been for you?
Really great. Really great. I think that we've got some exciting things that we've been able to do. This pandemic has certainly put a new spin on things. I had a baby, so that's
right.
An exciting addition to our family. A little quarantine baby. He was born right as everything was shutting down, and we were kind of the last people to go into the hospital before it got really, really difficult. So luckily he's healthy, doing well, and our family's loving that. So that's been really fun. I think I'm the first council member to have a baby while in office in Poway. So that's kind of an exciting thing. We haven't really seen that. I don't think the other 4 of them will be welcoming any new grandchildren. Yes.
Right.
And so that's been really exciting. And then with the city, I mean, especially with the things that we've been doing since the pandemic to try to help our local businesses, that's been a really special thing. It can feel frustrating. There's only so much that we can do when we're tied to some of the state and county orders. But being able to offer small business loans, even just loan out picnic tables or open up our parks to, do yoga and things like that. I think that sometimes those little things can really go a long way to make people feel like they're a part of a community and that, we have this small town feel and we want to do what we can to help. So the work's definitely not done. We'll be feeling the impacts, I think, for a while, but I'm really confident in kind of the strategy that the city's been using to ensure that we're maintaining a balanced budget and not reducing services to residents while also, doing what we can to help above and beyond that.
Right on. I mean, it's interesting. I would imagine I'm trying to walk in your moccasins for a minute because you were elected in 2018. And then we had the water crisis in Poway. And then we've had everything going on with 2020 with, COVID and protests and Black Lives Matter. And then you have a baby on top of it. I mean, how are you able to juggle all of that at the same time?
It's a little crazy. Luckily, I mean, my husband is super supportive and we have a really great family support. My parents help out a lot with the kids. They absolutely love being grandparents. So I just, I try to do what I can. Having the ability to do so much virtually has been actually, a really big blessing in dealing with all of this stuff because I'm able to work from home. Since the quarantine, all of the regional meetings that I've been going to are via Zoom. So I'm able to kind of lock myself away and the kids can play and I do my work and I don't actually have to leave the house. So it makes it a little bit easier, but I think it's hard to feel that you're being as effective when you can't get out there and be, face to face with people. But I just, social media has been a big tool in trying to get information out and help people. So I do a lot of that while I'm, kind of sitting at home trying to balance making lunch or changing diapers and checking emails. And you just kind of, I think moms get really good at multitasking. So it's just another one of the tasks that I'm juggling.
So how old is your oldest child now?
She will be 3 in December. So she's like 2 3/4. She just started preschool. So that's super exciting. She loves it. And so that's a couple mornings a week that I get with just the baby, which is kind of nice. And he will be 6 months this month. So
It's just awesome. So are you getting a good night's sleep? How's that working out?
no.
Right?
What's that? What's that? No, I swear they have like sibling ESP. So even if, if one wakes up and I'm like, okay, I can still kind of, try to get a little more sleep or juggle this, the other one figures it out. And then they're both up and we're just, ready for the day, no matter what time it is.
Yeah. I remember those days myself. That was pretty rough, but once they settle into a groove, it takes a little time though.
Yeah, I figured once my kids are old enough to like wake up and make a bowl of cereal and turn on some cartoons, maybe I'll start getting a little more sleep. But until then, it's just, that's parent life, right? We all kind of go through that zombie phase.
Right. Yeah, I remember that. Well, let's just dive in. I mean, I got a whole bunch of questions for you, and then we're happy to take questions from the audience. If we're live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, so if you have a question, just leave a comment here. I've already seen one question from Amy Jackson. We'll hope to get to that, but it's my show, so I want to ask the first question. So obviously, now we're into districts for Poway, and you're running as an incumbent, but this is the first time you're running for District 4. Mm-hmm. And, obviously there's a lot going on in District 4 with the construction of the new housing and the Outpost and the senior center, community center. And now there's been, this proposal about the Fairfield project on Poway Road right near the bowling alley and the thrift stores. Mm-hmm. And I just like to get your overall take on this, because there's been a lot of chatter on social media. People really concerned. Oh yeah, really? Yeah. Just people really concerned about traffic and congestion and how long it's going to take to get from Garden Road to the freeway. So, walk us through how you see your vision for Poway Road and what you think that site should be that Fairfield is considering to build on.
Well, first, I have to be really careful about how specific we get about talking about any kind of proposal being approved at that site, just because they do have the right to come forward in an unbiased hearing if they choose to do so. So I won't get too specific about that. I think tomorrow night will be a really important discussion because I do think that there are elements of their proposal that don't work with our community. They don't fit. It's too much. It's not really offering the types of community benefits that I think we're looking for. And so when you talk about kind of that overall vision and when the council brought forward the new Poway Road specific plan, kind of what the goal was, and there was a lot of talk about creating a town center, creating a destination, creating something that offered more to residents. In my opinion, I don't feel that the point of the specific plan was to bring in more housing. It's a consequence of the difficulty in building commercial and essentially it's a risky investment for developers, and housing is a little safer as far as when you're looking at that cost benefit balance and ensuring that they can actually pay for the project. And they are in it to make a profit. They have employees, they have investors, all of that stuff. So to balance it, that's why we're getting that mixed use. And my understanding is when they did the specific plan and they did all the analysis of the economic need and what kind of drivers we have to support those businesses, there wasn't a big call for we need a lot more residential. It was not a lot more commercial. It was that we need commercial that attracts businesses or that attracts residents. So to balance that and have the right mix, I think that mixed use is appropriate in the way that we've seen it in Poway Commons and the Outpost. A much more balance, I think, of residential and commercial. When you're looking at projects that are essentially large-scale apartment complexes with some commercial thrown in there to kind of balance it, to me, that doesn't really fit what the goal was, because it isn't creating a destination. It isn't really offering more. And then when you're going above and beyond and asking for all the allowances beyond the specific plan, we really have to dive deep and see, is that offering what it should be to the current residents? Sure, we know we need rooftops. We know that California is in a housing crisis. We know that we don't have a variety of housing in Poway. We know that there's a need for that, but we have to do it in a smart way. And Poway Road is not just for residential. I think that the focus should be more on that commercial revitalization. And so that's what I look at really closely when we're talking about these proposals. Once the Outpost and the Commons come to fruition, I think people are going to really start to be able to see what that vision is, because I think that they're really going to set the tone for what the expectation is and what people can look for in those types of projects.
Well, it's interesting because you're talking about the ratio or the balance between commercial and residential, and the Outpost obviously seems to have a lot of both, right? But the Commons, my understanding is that the amount of commercial space in that project is pretty minimal compared to the amount of residential. Isn't that right?
It's about 25,000 square feet of proposed commercial. That's in the second phase of the project. So the difficulty with the Poway Commons in really seeing that balance is that the developer chose to split it into two, and really essentially the housing that they're building is going to pay for them to be able to develop the commercial side of it. So that's why it's going in two phases. Plus they have the affordable housing component, which is a whole other financing structure and different mechanisms. So to me, I think that you're also looking at the scale of the project altogether. And the density of Poway Commons is significantly lower than what's being talked about at Carriage Road. And so the type of housing, you're talking about townhomes with garages, not, studios and 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. To me, that's a very different type of community to build. In addition to some of the connectivity to Community Park and the improvements that they're making there. So to me, I think when you put the projects side by side, though there may be some similarities, I stand by my support of the Poway Commons, and I'm very skeptical of the current proposal at Carriage Road.
Yeah, the Carriage Road is the one at the bowling alley and the thrift stores, right?
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Okay, so because I know I was looking at your website and you talk a lot about responsible growth.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean to you?
To me, it means thinking about, I think smart growth that term has kind of morphed into no growth. And when a lot of people talk about that, they're really opposed to change. And we can't be opposed to change. It's just unrealistic. No change is still going to be change. It's just going to be stagnant. It's going to be deterioration, blight, things like that. So to me, I think that we have to look at every project on a case-by-case basis. I certainly don't have kind of this blanket, sure, everything that happens on Poway Road should happen, but I'm also not going to be opposed to something just because it is change. And I think that's what's particularly hard when we're talking about Poway Bowl and the thrift stores, is there's a sentimental attachment to that in the community.
That's right.
And that we have to kind of separate that out, because it's not up to me as a council member to say whether the Poway Bowl stays or goes. That decision honestly was made before I was even on the council, is my understanding. This has been in talks for a long time. And so as a result, we have to kind of come to terms with that, but then think about, okay, if it's not here, what would fit? What else would fit? And, if it's something that is more along the lines of these smaller scale projects, I think that we could probably find something that would be really great for the community. I do think that it's, whether or not Fairfield goes forward, I don't think that the site will stay as it is. It seems that the owners are certainly interested in pursuing that sale. So to me, it's about doing it thoughtfully, responsibly, having that community conversation. I've been in contact with a lot of residents over the last week about Tuesday's item, and just kind of hearing their concerns, but also sharing the information from my side when maybe they get a little bit of misinformation or they don't quite understand something, or, part of the story is missing. I like to try to fill in those gaps, as well as really be responsive to what they're concerned about, and tell them when I agree with them. I mean, it's not always just that we're, going to be on different pages about things just because I'm supportive of things growing and changing in a way that they should, without, doing it in an irresponsible way, in a way that ignores the needs of the community, that ignores the community character, and those concerns.
So, yeah, because I think obviously the Outpost and the Commons project, those have gone through the whole process. The horse is out of the barn, right? So those are being built. And then this new project that was, and I know you have limited ability to talk about it, but that's the one that was in the news that here locally people were really concerned about.
Mhm.
What is the ordinance for height or stories along Poway Road right now? Do you know?
Yeah, so it generally is 2 stories. We across almost, I think, the entire city, it's 35 feet. What happens is when you design a specific plan and you want to entice developers to offer things to the community, you put in kind of these nuances that allow them to, well, if they offer this much, community benefit, then maybe they can get up to 3 stories or 4 stories. If they offer this much, they can have, a higher density. And the goal is to try to balance, not just having developments that are private and have no public access and there's no, interest in involving the community with things that fit the community. And so with Fairfield, the issue with that property is the way they did the specific plan with it's a downslope. And so they're looking at 35 feet from Poway Road. That's how you're getting some of those higher numbers. Whether or not they're appropriate for that site and whether or not the community benefits that they're offering to offset those are valid is kind of where the council has that discretion. Because to be honest, with the way that the state legislature has passed some laws regarding state housing, if a proposal came through that fit perfectly within the specific plan, we would not have the discretion to deny approval. And I don't think people really understand that. I mean, we would essentially be opening ourselves up to a lawsuit. It would cost the city who knows how much money to fight that. And ultimately, the courts have shown that they're going to rule in favor of property development, especially if it includes housing.
Yeah, that's interesting because that's part of the fear with the project up at the farm, right? That if Poway doesn't take control over that site, the voters approving it, that there may be a situation where the state could come in and dictate to us how we use that land. Is that true?
I believe that. I think that we're seeing trends. The state is not a fan of voter initiative approvals for land use. They recommend against those in their housing element language. And so I think it's only a matter of time. We've seen them challenged in other cities. And so I think that it would be silly to say that could never happen here. I think that it's certainly with the size of that property, in addition to the fact that it's already disturbed land, it's not habitat, it's not even, open space that may not have habitat, but is still open space. It's been developed. And so I would be very, I would not be very surprised if something moved forward on that then took away the voice of the voters and perhaps even would take away the voice of the council. It's getting pretty extreme when it comes to addressing housing in Sacramento. And so I know that, people think that sounds like fear mongering or that I'm trying to pressure. But in reality, I think if you look at what's happening in other cities, it's not unrealistic to think that could happen here.
Right. Yeah, it seems like the folks up in Sacramento have had really shifted gears because for the longest time, we had these zoning laws that prevented development, kind of the NIMBY laws, I guess you would call them. I mean, where they're dealing with it, we're down by the sports arena in San Diego right now too, the height ordinances and everything else. But I think there's so much pressure to lower the price of housing by increasing supply that, it seems like Newsom and the crew up there are kind of pushing an agenda statewide.
Absolutely. And to them, inventory means, get as many as possible, which means high rise, high density housing. Whether or not it's affordable, they're just looking at the numbers that you're able to fit into these parcels. So to me, I think that at this point, at least you have a plan that has gone through an extensive community input process. Kevin is extremely accessible, is active to answering questions. And it's locked in. The voters do know exactly what they're getting, which is very different than when this a different proposal came forward a couple of years ago, which was extremely vague. And it was really, we're probably going to put this many houses, but we're not going to map it out. We're not going to tell you where the houses are. I don't think I would have voted for that either.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, obviously nobody wants high rises like, those giant buildings in Mira Mesa. But it is interesting that, we talk about Poway, it's the city and the country, right? And people are saying, are we the city? Are we the country? Or what's the ratio? I'm sometimes wondering, does that even, it's a nice slogan. Does it still apply in 2020? What do you think?
Well, I think Councilmember Mullen once said, we have a city portion and we do have a country portion, and Poway Road has never been country. That's always been, smaller lots. It's been our commercial area, things like that. And so I think that it's important to remember that by trying to help revitalize that area, it also enables us to protect other areas and have that, those economic drivers that help support our city without thinking that we need to completely change the community character of another part of Poway. I think we have to really acknowledge that we have our commercial zones and we need those to be thriving.
Yeah, it's interesting, is I've lived in Poway since 1996, and ever since I moved here, they were always talking about revitalizing Poway Road to all the things you said. It's make it a city center, a walkable downtown, a mixed use, residential, commercial, something of a central area for Poway. And now we're finally doing it, and now some people are concerned and upset. So it's difficult. It's almost like you can't please everyone when you dive into these projects, even if you get community input up front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's one of the difficult things about being a council member is you have to take a position on things. You can't just sit back and say, well, I'm just going to listen to everybody and see what everybody says. Because for as many people that you'll find that are happy about something, there's going to be people that are really unhappy about it or think you should have done it a different way. And so you have to kind of be true to what you believe. And that's why, during a campaign, you really try to communicate not just your ideas about specific things, but your perspective. Because there's going to be things that come up in a term that you didn't necessarily talk about in a campaign. But if people understand what my vision is or where I'm coming from, what my values are, they're entrusting me to then make those votes. And so I think it's important that we really kind of share more than just, talking about specific things, because you do have to be that leader and take a position, and you can't always just try to please everyone and make everyone happy. And that's been a really hard thing for me as a council member, because I genuinely, I don't really like people not liking me. That's always hard to accept, I think, for anybody. And oftentimes it's not for things that I've purposely done or said or try, it's people that don't actually know me. And that's hard. If I do something and that makes you mad, that's one thing, but there's a lot of, assumption and people kind of spin these stories, and I don't have any say in them, and that's hard.
Yeah. All due respect, I think it comes with the territory, right? Being an elected politician, you're going to have, friends and naysayers. So yeah, but it's got to be tough on your psyche sometimes when some people can get kind of angry. Have you encountered any of that since you've been here in Poway?
People in Poway getting angry?
Yeah. Okay.
It's usually not directed towards me. It's generally, people having conversations, and either I stumble upon them or I'm told about them, and they're angry with maybe what they think I'm going to do or what they think I did do, what they think I was a part of that I wasn't. It's always hard to understand. I think people are very passionate about their city here, which is a great thing. And we have a lot of engagement, which is fantastic. And I can't complain that I know I'm going to make people unhappy sometimes, but you do try to balance it and feel like you're doing the best good for the most people.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to do what you think is the right thing. That's the reason you were elected in the first place, because the voters trusted you and your judgment. But yeah, it's got to be hard. You're dealing with the stress of being a mom. This has been a crazy year, I'll tell you what. Hey, let's Friday night, like a couple of last week, was the League of Women Voters online forum. And what'd you think of that? How'd that go for you?
I thought it was good. It's the first time that we've all, I've never spoken to some of the candidates. So just to even be like in the same realm, I guess, or room was nice. And I thought the questions brought out some good discussion. And for as strange as the format was, I thought it went pretty smoothly.
Yeah, I thought it was really good. And, the League of Women Voters, they run a tight ship, right? So I
No
thought they
one
did
messed
a good job.
around.
Yeah. So one of the things that you said in that forum, we're talking about affordable housing sites. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about housing. And you said that, you didn't want to build at the Big Stone Lodge,
Mhm.
and that you had identified that you thought the best place for affordable housing was at the Monte Vista site. So walk me through how you arrived at that decision, and what is your, like, if you can wave a magic wand, what would you put at that Monte Vista site?
Oh, okay. So first, currently the city has 3 properties that are owned by the Housing Authority that are kind of up for grabs when it comes to affordable housing. We have Big Stone Lodge. We have the site on Twin Peaks, which was considered a few years ago for veterans housing. And then we have the site on Monte Vista that's up the hill a little bit past Pomerado Hospital that really doesn't get a lot of attention and hadn't really been talked about much when we were having conversations about affordable housing. And I think when you start to dive into some of the details about that, especially when comparing it to a site like Big Stone Lodge, to me, it's a very obvious, appropriate site. It's very accessible to public transportation. The MTS bus line goes right down Pomerado. And if we're talking about folks like veterans or adults with disabilities, being close to medical care is absolutely a benefit. There's a lot of medical facilities, and in addition to the hospital in that area, and it's one of our biggest sites. So to actually be able to make a difference and make an impact, and not just offer a handful of housing units, to me, I thought that that's kind of the obvious choice if we're going to really get a good proposal. And that was the whole point, is really asking the affordable housing community, what do you think you can do here to serve our residents? And I'm extremely interested to see what comes back, because I think there are some really innovative, affordable housing doesn't just look like apartment complexes.
Right.
There's a lot of different ways that they can be done. I mean, we have some beautiful homes that are affordable housing, townhomes in Poway. I would love to see, if we're looking at veterans, something that had maybe some support for veterans. There's really great nonprofits that can help with that. And maybe something that, has a little character to it, like a type of village or bungalow style, or something that, it doesn't have to be like a 3 or 4 story apartment complex that doesn't add any, value or character or things like that aesthetically. But affordable housing is really complex, and there's, a few kind of companies and nonprofits that do it really well. And so I'm hoping that one of them will be interested, and that we'll actually get a proposal that is possible. Because there's always the fear that we get something back that we know won't work, or we don't get anything back. And so to see what we're able to, what the interest is out there, I think is really important.
Yeah, it's interesting, as I'm trying to make sure I understand the process here. So this is, it's funny. If I've been back over by that Monte Vista site, I had like a periodontist appointment back there, and it's like this island of like empty space, and
Yeah.
it's like really old asphalt, like an overflow parking lot, if I recall.
That
And
it maybe was used as parking once upon a time for something.
yeah, so there's so few empty lots like that in Poway. So, but ultimately, it's a private property owner, right? And then if they brought in a developer that specialized in affordable housing, then you on the council could either say yay or nay to the property or to the construction, right?
That property is owned by the city. It's owned by the
Oh,
city housing authority. So that's where, when we're talking about kind of having full control over a site, it's Twin Peaks, Monte Vista, and Big Stone Lodge that are owned by the housing authority, which technically isn't the city. It's a separate, there's a firewall there.
okay.
But we serve as the Housing Authority Commission, I think is what we would be called. And so what we're hoping to do with the request for proposals that went out is kind of put out the details on the property, kind of what is allowed there, what the zoning is, what density, And then at the council meeting, we had a little discussion among the council members of what we might like to see, what we're looking to do. And you kind of throw it out there, and companies like Mercy, Chelsea, that do affordable housing can look at, because oftentimes they have, there are ways that these companies, if you're Section 8, you are paying, a rent of some sort that goes back to the company to help with some of that operation. There's grants, other type of funding. So what we would do is basically offer the property, and the company would then pay to build and operate the complex. So our role is really kind of being the landlord, I guess you would say, and cutting away that purchase price of the land to help make it more feasible for them.
So is that like the same paradigm as is it Via de Vida?
Yes, it's essentially exactly what happened there. They had private fundraising and investing and got grants and all this stuff, and we were the landowner that could jump in with that as our kind of partnership towards the affordable housing.
I see. Okay. So, you mentioned Big Stone Lodge, and, you said you didn't think that was an appropriate site. That's obviously a hot topic, especially for the people in District 4. I mean, again, let's ask the magic wand question again. What do you think should be there if you had sole authority? What's your thought?
If I had sole authority, so I don't think it should be owned by the housing authority. I don't think I would have supported that purchase if I had been on the council. And it's have you ever been down there?
Yeah, many times.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful area of Poway.
Yes, it is.
With the stones, the creek, the trees, all of this. So I've kind of imagined, there's a community member, Mariana Basila, who has kind of created like this story almost of what could happen if it were transformed into a passive park. And really that would be very low maintenance on the city's end, because it's not like we have to do a lot of landscaping. It's already, naturally beautiful. I'd love to see some of that history preserved, even have like one of those, like boards that have old pictures or some of the history of the site, and picnic tables and things to enjoy the area. And then there's trails right there, obviously. So it's a great kind of starting or stopping point for some other activities. I think that there could be some really cool things that we do with the stones, that are really the, identity of the property. And so I'm really doing some talking to folks and thinking on my own about how we might remedy the issue of it being owned by the housing authority, because really that creates some barriers. But it, we're not locked into anything there. So the opportunities are there.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, originally when they talked about it being a housing site, I thought about it. And then when I went out there and looked at it a second time, it just didn't feel right, as a place for, because there's a lot of, manufactured homes, and it's just it's like a time warp when you go down that street.
It's a very special part of Poway.
Yeah.
You don't realize how far down Old Pomerado goes. There's really, it's almost like the Wild Wild West in a little bit.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
A lot of the traditional type housing and stuff like that. And so I don't see a project that would fit, that would also work with all the kind of issues with the site when you're talking about floodplain, habitat, and all of those things. I mean, I think if we were to pursue it, the amount of units that we'd even really be able to put there would be negligible.
Right.
And so to go through all of that and take away a site that has so much history, when you're talking about, the origins of Poway, to me, it's kind of like, why would we pursue that when we have other sites like Monte Vista that are really primed for something like that?
That makes sense. I'm wondering, I'm just thinking ahead, like that site, they got the ugly chain link fence around it and the rusty air conditioners on the roof. I wonder if they stripped all that away, if it could be like a site, almost like the equivalent of a Greek ruins, or if it would be rebuilt into some sort of a functional space for weddings or any kind of an event. What do you think about that?
I mean, I prefer more passive. I think that events Parking would be a really difficult issue with that.
Mhm.
Even when they have events at the VFW, it gets really difficult for cars. There's a lot of no street parking in that area. So I could see that being a bigger impact to neighbors. And really, I think that it should, should be there for residents to enjoy as they please. So to me, I'd love to see, if there is something that could be done that's, reminiscent of what the lodge looked like or something like that. I mean, there's like the huge fireplace that's still there and some of that stuff. So to me, I think there's a lot of possibility. We haven't moved forward with any of the demolition or anything like that. So it's still all on the table to be discussed. And I think there's a lot of possibility. We just have to start having those conversations.
Right on. That makes sense to me. So hopefully that, I don't know when the council is going to tackle that. Do you know? Because it's been sort of in a limbo here for a number of years, right?
I think staff is still, a lot of things kind of stopped abruptly back in March. And so staff is still working on how the best way to go about having that conversation with the community of how to safely demolish the unsafe parts and get rid of some of that vermin. And there's just, it's gotten pretty nasty over there. And so even to just get a little bit through that process and have it not be such an eyesore, I think we might even start to see the possibilities of what it could be, arise organically as we go through that. So it's all still to come. There's nothing that's been decided yet, even with how to move forward with the demolition. It's simply something that we are able to do in a way that will make sense. And I'm definitely following it closely with staff. So
right on. Well, yeah, that's District 4 right there. So
yeah,
that'll be so, we're doing this as a live stream and we encourage you in the audience, if you have questions for Councilperson Frank, please leave those questions in the comments on Facebook or YouTube and I'll ask them. And we do have a question here. This is from Amy Jackson. And she says, do you support the current $500 in lieu fee for developers to avoid building affordable housing? And if the answer is yes, explain. And then if not, then she has some additional thoughts. So let's just go with the in lieu fee, $500. What's your thought on that?
Amy, check your email. I sent you an email about that.
Okay.
Let me just read the email that I sent her. The fees, they've been talked about. Usually they came up in 2018 and they're coming back up again this year. It's a fine line that you have to walk with those fees. The purpose of them is to, you want to entice developers to include affordable housing as a part of their project, but you don't want to have them so high that they're just turned off from even doing any work in Poway, period. And so you have to walk that line. I'd be interested to see, and some of the conversations I've had with the city manager is kind of where do we fall countywide when it comes to those fees. They're only one portion of some of the fees and costs that developers incur during a project in a city. So kind of where are we at? I think that, we shouldn't be on either end of the spectrum. Personally, we tend to kind of fall somewhere in the middle or the third on things. So I'd be curious to know where we are countywide. But I think that it hasn't inhibited us from building affordable housing. We have over 700 units in the city, serving families, not really serving veterans, but we've got senior units. And so we've been able to do quite a bit, I think. And so that combined with the fact that of the 2 projects that are approved on Poway Road, one of them does include affordable housing. And we've got the site at Monte Vista that we just talked about. So we're still doing it. I think if we hadn't seen any affordable housing, coming into the city, that would be a huge red flag. Like clearly we've got an issue. Mm-hmm. But we have been able to make strides in that. And so whether or not the fee, needs to be examined and changed, I think that we've still been able to really address affordable housing. And, I'm only one person. And so I know that there's been other council members that have been very opposed to that. They feel that the cost for building is already significantly too high, which is a factor in the housing crisis. So we have to think about that too, is I don't know that I would have the support on the council necessarily to bring something forward, especially during a recession.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. God, there's so much going on with like housing and development right now, and we've covered a lot of it. Let's switch gears a bit.
Okay.
Um, so when we met last time in 2018, and you came in our studio, we had a nice conversation, and we were all getting to know you, at that
Mhm.
point. And I know that you had a lot of experience working at the county. You were working for, was it Supervisor Horn,
Uh-huh.
if I recall? Yeah.
Yep.
And I remember you told me that one of the key, you know, um, benefits or, that you bring to the table is that you have a lot of these connections at the
Mhm.
county that you think you can bring forward to Poway to help out. And I was just wondering if you can share some examples of some of those types of, bringing in people that you know.
Yeah. I think one of the really cool things was Abraxas High School actually got a county grant to bring in some showers and I think washing machines, but I'm not positive about that. But essentially, you have kids that maybe don't have access to that at home that were needing facilities like that at their school. And with in conversations with Ginger at the school board, we kind of lobbied the county and got some grant funding for that. So just even knowing that that grant program existed is one of those things that most people that maybe don't deal with the county much would know about. And so being able to do that, I think, was huge. When we did have the water crisis, we have regional, I have regional relationships with a lot of water authority board members and water districts. We were able to get assistance and really, have people, because we were testing constantly throughout the city, and that's a huge burden on staff. We just didn't have the
Mhm.
manpower for it. So to have, people come into the city and help us out and things like that, and then just being able to have good relationships with my colleagues on the council as well, and really understand kind of and respect them and their role. I think that I didn't come in adversarial, and I wanted to work with them. And to me, it's been a benefit because I think that the conversations about Big Stone Lodge, I've been very outspoken about that. And they respect that that's the concern in our community, and um, have been very, they were very supportive of identifying the Monte Vista site. So I think that there's a lot of just you don't even realize that those things are happening because of my experience, but just being able to have that grasp of government and understand kind of what the role of a city is and what our ability is. I've also been in touch with the county a lot during this pandemic. I have friends that are working there, and so I'm able to kind of just send a text and say, okay, clarify this for me, like what can open, what's not open, what are the rules, what's the timeline, things like that, and share it with residents that ask me, because ultimately we aren't in charge of those things, and it's been very complicated following the orders from the county and the state. I think if even I'm confused about what we can and can't do, I'm sure the average the average resident it's exhausting to follow. So just even being able to call somebody and say, hey, can you kind of explain to me what's going to happen at the press conference today, so I can let people know, I think has been really valuable.
Right. Well, right on. That's good. I think that's really helpful because I know, yeah, during that water crisis, that was some trailblazing efforts. I'm sure a lot of people on the staff had to deal with. I mean, what went wrong there? I mean, it was a maintenance issue with keeping a flap open, right?
A flap malfunctioned.
Yeah.
So we had massive rainstorms before that.
Mhm.
And so the flap, under all of that pressure with the rainstorms, it malfunctioned, and it was basically rope. So debris from some of the runoff got stuck in there and wedged it open. And so we had basically some storm runoff
Mhm.
get into our water system. It was
Mhm.
very quickly identified and remedied. But we had protocol with the state to follow, and we did what we were supposed to do, and we did not receive a citation and are moving forward.
So when did that go down? Was that like in November of last year?
It
When was it?
was like right after Thanksgiving. So I
Yeah.
think the weekend right after Thanksgiving.
Yeah. I'm surprised that didn't land in 2020 as well. This
It was
year has just
a
been nuts.
preview.
Yeah. So, let's one other tangent on the whole county is obviously our mayor, Steve Vaus, is running for county supervisor. And I know that's going to be a close race. I think we're all fascinated by that. But let's just take the hypothetical that he wins and he is put up on the county board of supervisors. what do you believe is the right process to go about replacing a mayor? Should the council appoint someone, or should we go to a vote, or what are your thoughts?
I'm really glad you brought this up because there's a little bit that I want to set straight too. I've seen a lot of this, this hypothetical situation is obviously being talked about a lot. We all, it'd be nice when it's solved and we kind of know what we have to deal with. But I am extremely happy being a council member. My kids are very little. Being mayor is a significant jump in workload and time commitment, time away from my kids. So any of those types of conspiracies, I just want to put to rest that I would not and will not be throwing my hat in the ring for that. Okay. It's not at all something that's on my goal list. So to just clarify that, and I've never told anyone that I wanted to do that. I've never had conversations with people about that. And frankly, I've never mapped out my career path. I think that there's also been those statements of, I'm just using this as a stepping stone or a ladder. And I don't know where that comes from because my husband joked that I haven't even told him what those plans are. So, if all these people seem to know and he doesn't, there's something wrong. I'm very happy raising my family here and being a part of the city, and that, we can't predict the future, obviously, but to say that I've got something mapped out is just not true. As far as if Steve wins, and I think he would be a huge asset at the county. Personally, I think so. Special elections are quite expensive. I think that my preference would be kind of a blend of appointing someone from the council to be kind of this caretaker mayor for 2 years. All of us have been or will have been elected. So it's not kind of surpassing that total will of the people for mayor. And then I would probably prefer to see a special election to fill that seat. I don't know if I'm in the majority on the council. We obviously can't talk about that stuff together. So to me, I think that, and especially running a district special election should be more affordable for the city versus a citywide. And that would probably be my preference to kind of balance the financial impact, but also ensure that, the residents of Poway don't feel like they're completely being ignored when it comes to what their city leadership looks like.
Yeah, but how much money are we really talking about? I mean, is it about $100,000? That's a number I've heard thrown around.
At least, probably, I think like a city council race might be $300,000 to $500,000, I think, and mayor would be maybe closer to like 800.
So a lot more. Yeah, I'll just tell you my opinion on that. I think you got to do an election, even if it's just for 2 years, because again, all due respect to you, but there have been a lot of appointments on the city council, and that's ruffled some feathers. Having an election, I think, makes it more transparent, and I think it would probably calm the nerves of some people in Poway.
I hear that, and I think that there just has to be, an aspect of realism of what we can afford, what would make sense, the timeline, all of that. And so I think that if there isn't the will to have elections for both seats, or have a mayoral election that could potentially result in a vacancy on the council. I mean, that there's also that kind of domino effect that could happen. And so I think that having kind of this caretaker mayor for a couple years that is elected, maybe elected as a council member, but still was elected, it to me is more of a balance. And then having an election to fill whichever seat that was, to me is more feasible. I feel like I maybe could get more support for that on the council, because it is a lot of money, and it's a difficult undertaking to have your own election in such a small area. But that we'll have to see kind of what comes out of November 3rd.
Yeah, I think we're going to find out. I think we're all anxious to learn, and I mean we won't go down this path, but I'm just fascinated with the supervisor race because there's just a lot going on with it. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, we'll see how that one shakes out. So got another question here from the audience, and it's from one of our big supporters of the podcast here, Pete Neild. And Pete asks, he says, for Councilman Frank, you represent D4, District 4, and a lot of people feel that District 4 suffers with just one vote and has lost when the other city council members set their minds to something. How will you show them, I guess he refers to District 4, how will you show District 4 that you can represent them and shed the feeling of them getting dumped on?
Well, I guess I love more specifics on getting dumped on. I think if you're talking about Poway Road and, you know, the two projects, 194 housing units, to me, I don't see that as being dumped on. I think that's bringing some really exciting new things to the area. A new community and senior center, I don't think that's being dumped on. It's going to be beautiful. So I think that there is a narrative that gets kind of spun, but an example would be the fact that we are not pursuing anything at Big Stone Lodge right now. Like that, I'm sitting with 4 council members who approved the purchase of that by the Housing Authority. So to me, I think that shows huge progress of the conversations I've been able to have about why that's not appropriate, the conversations that community members have brought up, the emails they've sent council members, things like that. So to me, that's a great example. And I've worked really hard to be accessible. I'm on social media a lot. My cell phone is out there, my email is out there. And so the biggest thing that I can do to represent people is to talk to them. And I try really hard to be involved in conversations and share my thoughts. And whether or not everyone agrees with me, I think that you can't say that I ignore people or am unresponsive. So that to me, I think, is a huge part of being a council member. I know Pete talked a lot about listening to people and talking to people. And that's the best way to represent them. Like we said, you can't please everybody and not everyone's going to agree with me. But when I go in to make a decision, I like to at least feel like I've heard a good round, you know, kind of had a well-rounded input and discussion with people, and go from there. I mean, I think it's going to be a case-by-case thing of whether people feel like I'm representing them, but I just try to kind of share my perspective and hopefully that resonates with people.
Well, I'll give you credit because you jump on social media, and some of the other council members are either not on social media or probably a little more calculated in how they use it as a communication tool. You seem to just jump in and answer questions, and that's a good. I love to see more. Yeah, right. Okay, so gosh, what else? So you know, let's talk about parks. This came up in the League of Women Voters Forum, and there's been some chatter online afterwards. You talked about the city doing assessments of parks. You know, take us down that path and what you think we should be doing with our park system.
So I think the question was really, you know, is do we have enough parks and what are we doing about that? And so I brought up that a few months ago, definitely before COVID. So I'm terrible, especially I was pregnant, so I have no sense of like days, time, right, whatever. But actually, Dave and Barry brought forward kind of this idea to do a full assessment of Community Park. It's our largest park. It has the most amenities when you're talking about, we also have the pool there, and we're going to have the new community center, and it should be the gem of our park system. It should be top notch. And the questions that they had were really, you know, is what we're offering at the park what people want today? So do we have the right amenities? Are people, you know, do we need this many tennis courts, or should we look at, you know, a pickleball court? Or should we bring in a place for bocce ball, or is nobody playing bocce ball, or just things like that? Do we have enough tables? Are the sports fields being used, or would that space be better for, you know, do we have more soccer than baseball, or just all of those things that I think you should kind of be aware of how your park's being used. To clarify, they're not looking at how the parks are being used right now. That was a big point of confusion. So obviously park usage is very different. Playgrounds are still closed, all of that. But the question was, you know, let's get a really good assessment of what our park is today and what needs to be done. We talk a lot about bringing in that new housing. We have those 2 projects approved that are not single family homes with outdoor space. There's some included in the development plans for residents, but Certainly, they're going to be connected to Poway to Community Park, have this brand new community center, the brand new pool. So our park should fit with what we're doing elsewhere. And so that's really what the assessment is. I think that, my feeling is we should be making our current parks the best they can be before we look at adding more. I live within 2.5 miles of 5 of our parks. So I don't know that quantity is necessarily what's missing. It very well could be quality.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. You go to different parks in town, and some get a lot more use than others.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you ever been to? Is it Starridge, the one that's on
I
Starridge
love
Road?
Starridge Park. Yes, that's one of the ones I live. I think it's like 2.1 miles from me or something.
Yeah.
It's a very cool park. The play equipment is different than we have at some of our other parks. So my daughter definitely loves that park. I have some friends that live really nearby, so we've done a lot of kind of mom, obviously a lot of this stuff is just before we all had to stay home. We were doing a lot of kind of mom play dates there and things like that. And so, the question that we should be asking is like, okay, well, why is Starridge Park being used maybe more than Community Park? What are we offering there that we're not offering at our largest park? Another thing that we've talked about is kind of this accessible or inclusionary play equipment. So things that, kids in wheelchairs or that don't have quite the same mobility. There's really cool play equipment out there that allows for them to still kind of enjoy a playground in a really different way. So, and that's very different than like ADA accessible, where maybe they can get to the playground. But this would be, they could actually use play equipment. So I'd love to have some discussions about if, we could get something like that in our park. I think Community Park would be the most appropriate for that, being more central and the biggest park. So just having those conversations, I think at this point, the city is hoping to we really want to get like a formal assessment. So we'll actually put out an RFP to have someone come in and really look at, we'll have data from the city of reservations and camps and classes that use the park, and what those look like, but also to really, we want to get I'd love to have a community survey, maybe online. We'll do those kind of pop-ups, have city staff maybe in the park or in other areas of the city asking residents for their input. So it will be, I talk about it and the people are like, well, what do you mean you're doing that? And so you haven't seen it yet. It's coming, but that's one of those things that I think is important to have when we're talking about, should we add more parks, is, well, are we doing the best with what we've got now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Back to Starridge. It does have really cool playground equipment, but I was always blown away by how far back it goes. And then it goes back around the corner. It's a big park.
Yeah, it connects to like a whole other part of the neighborhood and kinds of stuff. Yeah. And then a lot of space. So, and when you're looking at that, it's like, is that something that, do we need another park, or is there something we can do there to bring in more usage or better utilization? So to me, I think I'd love to see how this assessment with Community Park goes, because I'm sure there are other parks in our city that need some TLC too. And so once we kind of have an idea, it may spur some thought or, improvements at other parks too.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I remember, I talked to Kevin McNamara, and I don't know if this is in the final plan for the farm, but he talked about the playground equipment for people with disabilities. And the way that I understood it, it was like, imagine a swing set, but instead it was like a platform that you could almost roll a wheelchair into like a safe, almost like a balloon basket, right?
Yeah.
And so and it would move and they could swing, and they wouldn't have to, get out of their wheelchair. I thought that was a pretty cool idea.
So when you Google kind of like inclusionary play equipment and stuff like that, there's some really cool, innovative stuff that really gives kids, a sense of normalcy at a park that they maybe don't have all the time. So I think it'd be really cool to have.
Right on. Okay, we got, we're at 58 minutes. Can we go a little longer than an hour? Is that all right?
Yes, we started a little bit late, so yeah, we're good.
Okay. So the Poway Center for the Performing Arts is another hot topic. I know
that just came up in the forum. I was surprised.
I was too, and I think it came up in the school board forum, if I recall.
Oh, did it? Okay, I haven't had a chance to watch that one yet.
I think it did. But at any rate, yeah, it's cash flow negative. It needs maintenance and upgrades. And I know the city is thinking about selling it. I mean, what do you think should happen with that facility and that land?
So it has continually been identified by like the budget review committee as an issue that needs to be addressed. Since before I was on the council, they've been talking about how are we going to figure this out. It is a huge subsidy. It's a huge annual cost.
Mhm.
For a city our size, $500,000, $700,000. That's a huge difference. Um,
Yeah,
when when you're talking about those budget numbers. So um, I think
that,
that
that could fund a special election.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and we're talking about ongoing money. So we can
Mhm.
actually add, services and things like that with that money. Um, I think that, we were approached by the school district, which I think is a really important point of clarification. That they kind of had in their head that Poway High is the only school without its own performing arts center. And, hey, we've got this building on our land, and I know that you're worried about, the continued subsidy. So maybe we can come to an agreement. Sometimes things on paper sound a lot better than they are once you start digging through all the details. I have always said that my biggest concern is looking out for the community user groups. I would like to see whatever happens, however the model changes, that there's a seamless transition for them, that they continue to receive the level of services they've been getting, that they're able to have the events and the productions there that they have been and that they rely on. And so ultimately, the operating model has to change.
Right.
It's unsustainable. The council is very much in agreement on that part of it. What that looks like is, the big mystery that we're trying to figure out. Recently, I think Mayor Vaus appointed Dave and Barry to a subcommittee to start looking at, okay, we're kind of waiting for the school district to come back with, what exactly their operating plan would look like, what their budget would look like, and all these things, because we get to determine whether we think that that's feasible. Even if they make all these promises to us and say that they, will do it. There's no offer on the table right now that we're considering. And so now Dave and Barry are able to start working with there's been kind of an organized group of those user groups. And they're kind of working with them to start figuring out, okay, if the city maintained ownership, here's how much it costs. Here's kind of what we would need to figure out how to charge and what kind of usage. Is the usage proportion working? Because we have, some set aside for PUSD and then some set aside for Poway on stage and then the user groups. And so how is that working? How would that work? And ultimately, what would it cost? What would we have to charge to start making up that subsidy? So I
Mhm.
think those conversations are going to be really important. I don't know, obviously, how it's going. Can't talk to them about it, but I know that when they feel they have some information to share with the council, they'll come back with that. And it's really important that we get this right. Um,
Mhm.
and so personally, I know it's this ongoing budgetary thing that we have to worry about, but I don't feel that's a reason to rush into anything. I think that we need to make sure that we do it smart and we have the right input and the right model that will sustain it. Because the biggest concern is that we make a change, whether it goes to POSD or not, that we make a change that doesn't work and we lose the center. So
Yeah.
that's the worst case scenario, right? So doing it thoughtfully, and I'll admit, I don't think the school district has gone about some of their outreach and information sharing, and even just their communication with the city. I don't think they've gone about it in the right way, and they've kind of created probably more negativity than they
Mhm.
intended, than they
Mhm.
expected. And so that's been difficult as well, because I think that it's fair for them to try to figure out if it works. And I always want to ensure that our students have, my kids are going to go to Poway High. So I want to make sure that they have, great amenities there. But it's also an amazing resource for the city and for our community groups. So
Mhm.
it's going to be a huge topic of discussion and as we move forward. But right now it's still in that kind of figuring out what the options truly are.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me kind of a pig in a poke, right? You got the business model is struggling, the building needs maintenance, but it's what is a city-owned building on school-owned land, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that kind of creates a little bit of conflict as well, because if you had a third party buy it, then it would be a difficult deal to negotiate. So
It's
yeah,
a little, yeah, it's a little messy in there. And there was talk about when we first we kind of had these, I think, 4 options really of what it could look like. One being, we close it and it's gone, which is a
right.
non-starter. And I think the last option was looking at maybe another operator or contracting out those services. But I don't think we're there yet with exploring that. There's still, obviously there's the PUSD option, which hasn't really come to fruition, and we still don't know exactly what that would look like. And then there's how we would change and adapt our model to maintain it as the city, but not have such a huge subsidy to support it.
Right. Have you met Janet Letang?
I have. I have. I've
Yeah.
spent a lot of time with Janet. Yeah. She's looped right in with Dave and Barry because she's kind of become the, de facto president of this user group coalition.
Yeah.
And has an amazing wealth of knowledge about the history of
Mhm.
PCA and what groups are using it and what their need is, what their concerns are. So I've had a lot of conversations with her, and I think that she's a great advocate for them and has been really helpful for us to really understand. You go to see the Nutcracker that SoCal Ballet does, but you don't really know everything they need to make that production work and why PCPA is the ideal location. So even just learning those things and the nuances of how the user groups use the center is really important when you're making a decision.
Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Janet Letang is tremendous.
Yeah.
She's passionate. She's knowledgeable. She's community driven. So
And
yeah,
she's
I'm
also
glad that you
really
talked to her.
nice, which is amazing. You
Yes.
can actually have a conversation with her.
Yes.
So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yeah. She's wonderful. Have you seen her son as a performer? Have you seen any of the things he's
I
done?
have heard about him and how amazing he is.
He is incredible. So
That's
he is actually was my son's age at Poway High, and they graduated a couple of years ago. But yeah, he's gone on to college and he's still performing. So
that's
he's
what
a
I heard. Yeah, it's
yeah.
incredible.
So you've been in office now for like 2 years and a few months, and you're out on the campaign trail. I'm interested in hearing what are the people coming to you? What are the issues that voters are driven for that they're knocking on your door about?
Well, definitely what's happening on Poway Road is a huge factor.
Mhm.
That a lot of folks aren't, we live our lives, we're busy, we love living here, and it can be hard to keep up with all the little things that are changing or happening. And so a lot of times it'll even just be simple things of like, what is happening here? What's going on? Or how did this happen? Or what's the process to be more engaged or stay on top of it? So I definitely think the Poway Road redevelopment is a huge topic for everyone in the city. I think
Yeah.
we're all watching that closely. Kind of how the senior center is going to operate and ensure that we have a home for the seniors at the new community center, and when that'll be open and how that's going has been a big topic. Ensuring that we maintain our budget. There's a lot of coverage about having a budget deficit. A lot of concern about kind of some budgetary clouds on the horizon, and people like living here and want to know that the way of life is going to continue into the future, that we are going to have money for our public safety and our roads and our parks and all of that. And it's a lot harder to do if you have to start making cuts. So and kind of ensuring that we have those strategies. And I think the council is really well united on the importance of ensuring that we maintain our service levels, and that there may be hard decisions to make in the future, but one of the last ones you want to make is any kind of reduction in services. Whether that means we have to eliminate a deputy, or your roads don't, we change the 7-year cycle to an 8 or 9 or 10-year cycle, or things like that, that you really would see an impact to your quality of life here. And so doing kind of everything we can to ensure that that's the last resort is a huge topic. Protecting open space. I get a lot of questions about kind of what's the status of the Matati parcel. Right now, there is no status. My understanding is it would be extremely difficult to develop that property with like soil issues and the topography and all of that. In addition to, it does fall under Prop FF. So
Right.
that would be a whole other thing that they would have to tackle as well. And so those are Big Stone Lodge has obviously been a big one. PCPA is a big one. And kind of just the overall bigger, how are we going to manage our housing mandates? Where are we going to put that? Are we able to do affordable housing? So when we get back the proposals from Monte Vista, it'll be really interesting to see kind of what our options are and what that's going to look like. And as these things come to fruition and get completed, I think that people really start to see what it's going to look like. And my hope is that some of the concerns will be appeased.
Mhm.
I think that traffic is always brought up as a concern, and I absolutely understand that. I think that people underestimate how much of that traffic is from outside of our community. In the last 20 years, Poway's grown by 1,500 residents. So it's not that, our city is ballooning in size, but the communities that surround us have changed a lot and have grown a lot, and we've been impacted by that. So trying to kind of manage how that is impacting our traffic while also allowing some of that revitalization to happen, I think is going to be key to watch. And so my hope is that as these things, get completed, it'll help people see what we're trying to do.
Right on. Yeah, those seem to be the issues that I see and hear in social media. And, I interview a lot of the other candidates, and those are always the topics. Everyone's kind of got a different angle on it. And that's
Mhm.
what's so fascinating about having these discussions. One other thing you talked about in the League of Women Voters event, and I think it was kind of in relation to the budget, was the whole Shop Poway initiative, and trying to get us to, shop locally and more sales tax. But I have an interesting story on that one. So I live in North Poway. I live like off of Stone Canyon.
I wanted to ask you, why'd you move out of South Poway?
Because we wanted a house with a pool. Because my kids were young and we wanted to have that. And my wife wanted to get a bigger home. And so we moved up here. But yeah, we used to live out on Sycamore Creek, like on the very end of Garden Road, so
Mhm.
that was a beautiful neighborhood. We really enjoyed it there. But anyways, when we go to Costco, we used to go all the time to the one in Carmel Mountain Ranch because it's closer, right? But I've discovered that when I go to the one in the Poway Business Park, I'm home faster because there's less riffraff in the parking lot. I'm in and out of the aisles faster. It's less congestion, and it's actually ultimately more efficient. And I don't think people realize that.
They don't. And a lot of times, you're thinking convenience over necessarily where am I filling up. And a lot of folks, I've had multiple conversations with someone where at some point later in the conversation, I realized, oh, you don't actually live in Poway. You live
Mhm.
in Scripps Ranch or Rancho Bernardo, and so it does kind of get blurred a little bit, and especially when you're kind of going to and from those communities. And I think that people kind of miss the significance that it's not only property tax that supports your city, it's sales tax too. And that revenue is much more volatile. We're affected by the economy in a much greater way when it comes to that revenue source. And so just even something as simple as trying to fill up your gas tank in Poway before you leave versus, at some point on your way home or whatever can really make a difference. And it's a difference we'd see like in the next quarter when we get our sales tax. It's not, this long-term kind of vision, which is what a lot of the stuff on Poway Road is we hope that long-term it'll stimulate more revenue and our city will have a little bit of a more stable funding source. But that there's an immediate payoff if you can start stimulating people to be spending their money here. So I
Mhm.
think that, I brought forward the Shop Local back in November, and we had a really great month with the chamber, doing some promotions, doing some fun things. I've attended a lot of ribbon cuttings, not obviously in the past like 6 months, but last year we had a lot of great, even just little businesses opening up and being welcomed here. Trying to plan one for the Hop Stop soon so that we can officially welcome them. They had quite an opening week. And so just being able to really educate people on the importance of that and how it does make a difference. I had a lot of kind of these light bulb moments with people where they realize like, oh yeah, like that Costco's in Carmel Mountain. That doesn't really help make sure my streets are paved here and
Yeah.
that, our parks are clean and well maintained and things like that. So putting it in those terms, I think was really important. So I was really
Yeah.
excited about it. I hope that we're going to have it annually and kind of do some fun promotions, continue to do that. Obviously, we're going to need to support our local businesses as much as possible. We know that we're gonna lose some. We know that there's gonna be some really tough times. There are tough times right now, but anything that we can do to just really encourage that community feel and really give back, because we have business owners that are amazing members of the community and really give back to us. So now's our opportunity. You know, they've sponsored sports teams and fundraisers and all kinds of things. So as much as we can to make sure that we're patronizing those businesses, the better.
Yeah, right on. You know, I kind of play this new game. When, you know, it's like Friday night and I talk to my wife, what do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner? Right. And so we want to get takeout. So what we do is I get on Yelp and I type in Poway restaurants, and then I sort it, you know, from based on, you know, highest review, like the 5 stars at the top on down. And then I just start from the top and I go, have I been there? Have I been there? Have I been there? And then I pick one I haven't gone to. And I've had some great experiences going to places that not in a million years I would have gone on my own, because I never knew they even
Oh,
existed.
yeah. We have some hidden gems. We really do. I mean, I think there's like some really great spots in the Big Lots parking lot that people you don't really see.
Yeah.
And that's when we're talking about, not to tie it back to our specific plan on Poway Road, but one of the big things they did in that plan was change the setbacks to ensure that you had parking in the back and that your storefronts were closer to the street. And that's a huge thing, because you don't get that drive-by traffic when it's the road and, you know, 100 yards of parking, and then the businesses, they get lost. And so to really just reorient ourselves to have a place where you're driving by and you're thinking, oh, I didn't even know there was that place there, or, oh, I haven't tried that place, is really going to hopefully generate that kind of destination feel that we're looking for. Because some of our shopping centers, I mean, you might not have any idea what's in there.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever been to what's called North Park Produce?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, that's good. You know, and I've gone by it a million times and I was like, it's a produce place, right? But it's not.
No. And then it shows up on like Yelp and DoorDash and
Yeah.
then you realize. So I do hope that some of this stay-at-home stuff has encouraged folks to try different places, and a lot of our restaurants have really mastered their takeout game.
Yeah.
Figured out how to make sure you're getting your food and it's still good, and survives that transit. So I think that we have a lot to offer. I mean, people complain sometimes about, you know, there's nothing to do in Poway, or we don't have good restaurants or things like that. But if you kind of get out of your comfort zone and just even drive around some of our shopping centers, you're going to find some new favorites for sure.
I agree. And we got one of our viewers, Matthew Brannigan, jumped in and he said, love North Park Produce, exclamation point. And then he said, sad that Atlas closed though. Yeah. And I think that had a pretty cool food court in there at Atlas, at that marketplace.
It did.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the difficulty with that was the size was too much for what he does. Their other market, I think, is like half the size. And I think he struggled to really find not only an identity in the store, but really to find his place in Poway. I think there were a lot of people that didn't really know what was there, what they had, and it got kind of overshadowed. And so hopefully, you know, that's a huge anchor in that shopping center. So I know the owners of the shopping center are motivated to find a tenant and get something there. So maybe that'll bring some revitalization to that shopping center.
Yeah, right on. I think we're all looking forward to that. Here's another little twist here, a question. So I remember during our 2018 discussion, you know, you talked a lot about how you were brought up and how both of your parents were, you know, in law enforcement. Yeah. And I know that on your website, you've got the endorsement of law enforcement. So right now in Poway, from a law enforcement perspective, what are the big challenges that they're trying to overcome? What are the hot topics for the sheriff in Poway?
Community relationships are always vital and important. I think I was really proud to see how our protests happened in Poway. We had really great cooperation with our law enforcement. I mentioned during the forum, you know, they safely shut down an intersection for protesters. They've helped kind of maintain so that protesters and residents feel safe. So I think that we need to continue to have that. We have a new captain in Poway who is someone that I've known for a long time, has been an amazing part of the sheriff's department, and is extremely community oriented, very, willing to jump in, be a part of the community, which I think is really important. Our captain, operates as the chief of police essentially for Poway. And so it's important that he really knows the city, and he's been stationed here before, so he's already very familiar with kind of the layout of the city, the concerns, the issues, extremely approachable. And so I think that that's a huge thing that we need to continue to focus on. It's obviously very difficult nationally for both, people of color and law enforcement. So whatever, on our own smaller scale that we can do to ensure that those relationships are healthy and that there's a good line of communication, is vital. So that's always number one for me, is ensuring that our law enforcement feels like they're a part of the community, and that the community feels like law enforcement is there, with them in the community.
Yeah, it was interesting is like remember when they had that incident at La Mesa where the
Mhm.
protests were there and there was a bit of a standoff with the police, and Poway was proactive. I think they had a curfew for a few of those days. How did that like, kind of all play out from your perspective on city council? Were you involved in a lot of those decisions, or was that entirely on the sheriff?
That was the city manager and the sheriff.
Mm.
So in kind of these instances of emergency, obviously we're kind of kept in the loop, but ultimately that decision lies with the city manager as kind of the emergency coordinator, I guess you would say, for those things. And it was based on conversations that he was having with our law enforcement about intel they had, information that they had received. And he ultimately felt like, better to try to at least encourage people to be home. It's another tool that law enforcement, if they felt like people were lingering, that old saying, not a lot happens after dark type stuff. So just a way to encourage people to go home. No one was cited in a Poway. Nobody was arrested. Law enforcement was simply just kind of telling folks, hey, just so you know, there's a curfew. So, you're obviously free to go to and from your work and all of that, but hanging out at parks or, loitering or lingering and things like that. We just wanted people to be at home and safe.
Right on. Yeah, it seems like that all went pretty smooth. There were no major incidents at all. So, and then, yeah, the protests have been generally well behaved. And even the protests that take place every Sunday at Twin Peaks and Pomerado are pretty well behaved too. So that's good. We
Yeah.
got some good folks here in town. Last question.
Okay.
And thank you very much for sticking with me so long. So this is from another audience member. Actually, it's Pete Neal. He has another question. And this is a good closing question. So he says, it's September 2024. What are your best accomplishments?
Well, I think something I am really proud of is that I think I've developed kind of an identity in the community. As you said, 2 years ago, it was a lot about kind of getting to know me. And
Mhm.
now I feel like I have people that reach out to me that just because they've seen me commenting on social media or out and about, or they've, looked at the city website and wanted to reach out to me. And so kind of cultivating that identity and establishing my own voice on the council was really important to me.
Mhm.
There's a couple things that I haven't agreed with everybody on, and that I've tried to kind of take the lead on, and things like that, and just showing what's important to me. Like doing the shop local thing was really important to me. I think that we have fantastic businesses here, and I wanted to support them and show that the city was not just this passive supporter, but that we could really be active in supporting our businesses. So that was a great thing for me. The getting out the affordable housing RFP is going to be incredible. I was really happy that we were able to agree on Monte Vista and move forward on that. Those are tangible things. I think that approving the Poway Commons is going to be a great asset to Poway Road, and very proud of that. Looking forward to the community park assessment. I had hoped that we'd be further along and maybe have some things to share by now, but that's kind of changed things. And obviously having my son, I'm very proud of that, and the
Yeah,
addition
right
to
on.
my family. It's been really special. But ultimately, it's been kind of finding my place and developing these great relationships with businesses, with the chamber, with residents, and making sure folks know that I'm here to help. And I'm happy every time I'm able to do that.
Right on. So How is the best way for your constituents to get a hold of you or people that might want to support you on your campaign? What's the best way to reach you?
So my website is CaylinForPoway.com. It's CAYLIN, no T, and the actual word for FOR. My cell number, it's on the city website, 760-473-2065.
Mhm.
Calling or texting. You can also add me on Facebook, message me on Facebook, add me on Instagram. I'm of the generation that were very, social media oriented. So if you want to check out some pictures of my cute kids and all of that, definitely add me. And that's it. I mean, I'd love to try to get coffee with people, but it's a little different now. So that's one of my favorite things about campaign season is doing kind of neighborhood coffees and small meetings and groups like that, where you get to kind of have a conversation very much like this, where they just kind of bring up their questions or concerns, and you're able to really spend some time talking about them instead of, like the 1 minute that you have during a forum. So I miss that, but we could always try to do something virtually and see how that would go. And that's it. I mean, I'm here for you.
Right on. Well, that's how we connect. I reach out to you by Facebook Messenger, and you always respond. And so thank you very much for joining us here on the podcast. We're doing it as a live stream. The recorded version will be available on Facebook and YouTube, and then we're going to have the audio only up on all the audio podcast platforms shortly. Best of luck to you. I know you got a competitive race. You got two challengers, but good luck to you in this race. And let's find out what happens on, what is it, November 3rd? That's election day, right?
Yes, but you'll start getting your ballots around October 5th. So really, it's like voting for the month of October.
So, I got one more question. So if we hear all these stories about the delay in response, like for the presidential election, it could be a while after election day. But for the local races, do you think we're going to know quickly?
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. You don't want that dragging out.
I anticipate that the ROV has been staffing up, and that they'll, we usually on election day, the first results are, some absentee ballots. So if they're all mail in, I would think that we should be able to see results fairly quickly. Hopefully, because my heart can't take much delay on that. It's
Yeah,
already
really.
a day when you're waiting until
Yeah.
8 p.m. So
Yeah.
but it's going to be an interesting, 2020 is going to be a year of a lot of firsts, and this is another one.
Right on. Well, Caylin, thank you so much and good luck to you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.